Okay, welcome back, everyone. I see there are a few people still slowly filtering into the room, but if you can take your seats, we are at the final session for the day, and it's a fantastic one, but I will not give it away before we start. The only thing I will say is that we've heard a lot through the course of the day. During this session, we're going to be focused on understanding and addressing the drivers of underinsurance in emerging markets, so focus on public policy and regulation. And I think a lot of the discussions that we closed with in the earlier session, we sort of picked that up. I am really delighted. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And with that, I'd like to invite Ruth Lux, who we heard from earlier in the day, who's the head of Public Sector Europe, India, Middle East, and Africa for GAIP Carpenter. Welcome, Ruth.
Ekhosuehi. And I'd like to invite the panelists to please join me on stage. So please do come up.
That's me?
Yeah. Michel and Yoshi, thank you.
Sorry for the speed.
Great.
Wherever?
Yes,
Yoshi,
please.
You in the
And I believe we're going to be joined shortly by Alex, who's dialing in from New York. Great.
I'm actually.
Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Great. So thank you all for making your way back from the breakout sessions. And as Ekhosuehi said, we've got a really interesting topic to delve into and to close out the first day for the summit. And I think this is a really excellent way to do so. And what I'm looking forward to is I will ask from our excellent panelists for some very key recommendations towards the end of this session so that we can go into discussions tomorrow and build upon that. So we're joined by some esteemed panelists, and it's a real honor to introduce them. We have 30 minutes, so I'm going to keep the introductions brief, although given their accolades, I could say an awful lot more. But let me introduce Michel Lie, who's the chair of the Insurance Development Forum Steering Committee and chairman of Zurich Insurance and formerly CEO of Group CEO of Swiss Re. And to my left, Yoshihiro Kawai, chairman of the OECD Insurance and Private Pensions Committee, chairman of Global Asia Insurance Partnership, board chair of Seadrift Insurance Company, and a host of other accolades. And it's my pleasure to also introduce my colleague, Alex Moczarski, who's chairman of International, Marsh and McLennan Company. And Alex also has oversight of the company's international strategy. So with no further ado, I'll kick off by providing a framework for this discussion and then looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So since the beginning of this century, emerging markets have made an ever-increasing contribution to global insurance premium growth. And although insurance markets in emerging economies grew faster than in mature economies over the past 10 years, the momentum has primarily been driven by expanding middle-class populations and strong economic growth. At the same time, insurance penetration in emerging markets has only reached about 35% of levels recorded in mature insurance markets. So it's clear that the impact of protection gaps is most devastating in emerging markets. And to understand and address the drivers of underinsurance in emerging markets, it's important to examine how public policy and regulatory initiatives and incentives and barriers can facilitate or impede the development of insurance and contribute to sustainable economic development. So the objective of this session will be to offer reflections on broader public policy and regulatory incentives and barriers to market development objectives, and to draw upon the operational work that the IDF is engaged in and which we've discussed throughout the day. So Michel, I'll turn to you firstly, if I may. The discussions at the summit today have focused on the operational elements of implementing PPPs, that are geared towards addressing the protection gap. And at the same time, there is an acute awareness of the need to accelerate and to scale these initiatives. So what do you see as the major barrier to addressing this persistent protection gap?
You know, there are several ways to answer these questions. The first one is having a list in front of me, and I can go, by the way, through the list because I think it's important to go through this list. But there is a level of I don't say that the level of enthusiasm is missing, but there is a level of urgency which should be definitely intensified. And I think it goes much further than what we are experiencing in matters of protection gap. There is something which should happen in this planet that people realize that there are a few things which are totally unacceptable on the long term. And that's the point in which we need to start, because I think we got the tools, to be honest. I believe we got more or less the means, but we definitively do not achieve yet what we can achieve. And I think the lack of awareness is, I go through the list now. The lack of awareness makes a lot of sense. It's something that's one of the key elements. The affordability. Of course, nothing is totally for free, even if I do believe that there are quite a lot of things that can still be done. Access and availability, the way in which some of these protection products are sold is a way which is still quite complex if you think of some countries. So we have probably a model, if you take the private insurance industry, which is more or less tailor-made for a certain type of society, that we are not moving quick enough towards a model which would be perfectly adapted to other society. You know, when you think of mobile phone in Africa, there is quite a lot that could be done there. Some things are done, but probably not with the same level of urgency that we should have. The image of the insurance industry, so let's call it trust and perception, we are always a little bit a special animal within the financial service industry. Sometimes it's very good to be a special animal because if the other animal, the banks, are not very popular, then you enjoy a certain popularity. But I think it's a moment in which we should probably be prouder about what we can bring, speak about that, speak about that, and show to a lot of people that behind an insurer, there is something much more than an investor, but there is somebody who knows about risk. And I fear that we are a little bit short of knowledge about risk in the current situation. Knowledge and literacy gaps, the famous knowledge of risk. Regulatory challenge, we will come back on that, but I do believe that we need to make sure that regulators are making sure that there is an expansion of insurance market and not only a protection of the one which are existing, which is always a political challenge. Do you protect the one who are enjoying the values, or do you make sure that there are more people enjoying the values? And then cultural and behavior factor, we need to also know that in some society probably insurance is not that popular. We need to understand a little bit the why, understand a little bit the how we can address that. But what is sure is that cooperation between public and private sector, between academy, between all the people who are represented here is extremely important to move to that. And this cooperation combined with, it need to be coming also from the heart and the brain, a sense of urgency that we are jeopardizing probably the equilibrium of this planet if we do not address that a little bit quicker, is what happens. So the list is very nice. The rest has to come from heart and from brain and from all us together, and probably a little bit less modesty from the insurance industry in matters of showing what are the added values that we can bring to the table. It was too long, I'm sorry.
I'm not timing you. Look, I think that point around urgency is a really interesting one. And Alex, I'd like to turn to you and if you could speak a little bit to the extent to which the financial protection gaps result from a lack of available or affordable coverage relative to a lack of risk awareness or understanding of insurance exclusions and limitations.
Yeah, I'm just back from Mumbai and Hyderabad and met with the regulator there, and there's a lot of urgency there, Michel. I just wish that the rest of the regulators felt the same way, but I'm in agreement with everything that you said, which I normally am anyway. Well, my answer to that would be let's assume that it's 50-50 and let's try and solve to both. Okay, so as far as availability of economic cover, I think the parametric revolution is the one that's going to solve this. I really do. I think that is going to provide access to many people who never knew that was available. We've just, again, in India, we've come up with a cover for women who are self-employed, who can't go out and work because of temperature over 45 degrees centigrade. And so they will have a payout whenever the temperature goes above that. That sort of stuff, that sort of thing, where you don't have any issues around adjustment, where it gets paid to the individual, which is hugely important, because there's a lot of parametric insurance or insurances which are micro, but they actually go to the lender or they go to the supplier of seed or whatever. And I think to the extent that we have and can showcase individuals and at the lower end of the economic scale receiving the benefits of insurance, I think that's hugely important. There's a long list of things. I think as far as further availability, I would have regulators actually come up with a plan to provide less onus on capital requirements, a sandbox, fast approval, principles-based as opposed to rules-based. There are many incentives that could be provided. Also, tax incentives, and also government could help in the financing of insurance premiums, because I do believe that once beneficiaries and groups, families, etc., see the benefits of a payout, when you say, okay, we're now going to reduce that subsidy, they will want to stay insured. So I think there's a lot to be done. We talked about awareness, again, apps with smartphones, government projects, schools, financial literacy for inclusion, many things that we can do. And I'm excited by it, but I agree that the urgency is an issue.
And I think what you're saying about parametric innovation, again, that really speaks to a topic that's come up throughout this day when we think about the need for us to innovate and to provide different products that can be implemented at scale. So Michel, with that in mind, can the development of insurance markets close protection gaps, or are there other types of intervention or support that are needed?
No, they can definitively, but when we speak about data, we need definitively to progress on the use of the data in order to elaborate the product. And that's the reason why I think that risk assessment and modeling, and we are quite active at the IDF in these risk assessment and modeling, because modeling a risk, that's where it starts when you speak about parametric cover. When you want to do a parametric cover, if you don't have the model of the risk and the exposure that exists. And that is, in my view, something which is quite important. We are, at IDF, we are leading development of two pioneering global public goods. And the first one is the Global Resilience Index, which was launched at the COP27 in Glasgow, and provide reference data on climate and natural hazards risk to inform and protect population and economies, particularly emerging and developing countries. This index is supposed to if I may say, to complement, the classical Standard & Poor's and Moody's, which is giving a snapshot of the financial situation of a company or a country. This one is an index which is probably telling you, and by the way, in matters of resilience, this fantastic country is so-so, or this one which is probably not magnificent, but is definitively actively working on its resilience. And that's something which is important. The other element is the Global Risk Modeling Alliance, in which we establish really models. It's quite unique in its offering in private sector risk analytics capability for the benefit of public sector's program. So we have, through these two models, a fantastic way to boost the parametric solution and move to something which definitively makes sense. Beside that, of course, risk mitigation and resilience is important. I think that there is a moment in which we need to put again on the table the fact that there is no reason that only private corporation and individual get insurance. there is, and you know that better than I do, the fact that states can get insurance. So all these evolution, if you are not able to go to some countries in which the individuals don't have the power to buy something, but if the state takes care of them, especially if there is an exposure, with simplified covers and with simplified execution in matters of payment, that's what is key. So state, I would say large state, small state, emerging state should directly understand the power of insurance for themselves. And then, of course, the classical story, invest before instead of after. Invest before, what does it mean? Invest in infrastructure. I know it's much easier to get money when you show disasters, but it would be so much mature to prevent the disasters.
Yeah.
Ruth, could I something to Michel? So I know this sounds probably too revolutionary, but I do believe that there's still an issue of public and private trust between each other as well as with the public. And I think that the analytics, the modeling, data, etc., on an open platform is the answer, because then the public will know what the risks are, the government will know what the risks are, the insurance companies, etc. And one of the issues we have is a problem of democracy, actually, because the investment today could well be a payout in a government or another regime after an election. And that I've seen that be an issue. Whereas if everything is open, if let's say the United Nations or the World Bank bought this platform and worked together with academia and took it away from any profit-making piece, that would be a way where we can get trust across all the decision makers. And I think that's quite an important move, but I do think, and revolutionary, but I think that would resolve a bunch of issues. As Michel, I'm not an extremist.
Just yes, Michel and Alex mentioned trust, or and also modeling data, but maybe before building trust, modeling data, what is important, particularly government, or policymakers, is communication. Communication means that, of course, everybody in this room understands insurance is so valuable. And the previous panel mentioned, Karina mentioned that, ex ante have 6 times more reasonable price, or, save the money than ex post. And, this Mamiko mentioned that, this agriculture insurance is so valuable, but we have to communicate to the government and farmers. Actually, huge disaster, natural disaster, industrial ground, agriculture is damaged, and then the fact said that the suicide rate of farmers is highly up. So this is not only crop issue, but the human protection of human life issue. Mm-hmm. So fact is so clear that insurance is so valuable. But for example, C-drift context, when we communicate with the insurance government, in a country, they say this year we have no payout. So next year, when we face renewal, why do we pay premium? That's a kind of understanding of the government. So we have to communicate clearly what's the value of insurance. That's extremely important. Communication, make Ministry of Finance or government people and also citizens understand the value of insurance. Ex ante is so valuable, and we have to allocate more time and energy to communication, make value of insurance understandable.
Yeah, and as you say, it's that balance between both the communication piece more broadly around the value of insurance and alongside the trust that can be gained by bringing very open and transparent access to all the risk modeling and analytics and sharing that as a vehicle towards building that joint trust. And Alex touched earlier on the ways in which the regulatory environment can facilitate addressing the protection gap. So I'd love to hear from you on what you're seeing regulators and supervisors do around that topic.
Okay, thanks. Just, first big picture, addressing or reducing protection gap is a huge movement thanks to IDF and others, this community. But this year, I can witness this momentum have even accelerated. First, G7 just met three weeks ago. There is a clear statement, public-private cooperation or coordination to address protection gap is critical for our economy. This is the wording of G7 ministers. And it's not only emerging market, also developed countries. So all the countries, addressing protection gap is the key policy issues. So that's a first statement to make totally clear in the G7 level. And second, regulators, as Michel, you mentioned, regulators, I know regulators community so well, and their main focus is definitely protection of existing policyholders. But what happened this year is somebody mentioned this morning, IAIS, International Association of Insurance Regulators community, make it totally clear they care not only existing policyholders, but unserved policyholders too. And they start this, protection gap, how to address protection gap statement last month, and now working on, how to address, protection gap with a regulatory point of view. This is a very huge statement that, not limiting to the existing policyholders, but any policyholders, potential policyholders, is the domain of regulators' attention. And that's also a huge movement internationally. And more regionally, I know Asia very well, and the CDRIF that I chair is very interesting experience. Now, because of G7, now ASEAN plus 3 ministers focus very much just the risk financing is a key priority, and ask CDRIF to take care of Asian protection gap addressing issue. So this also creates huge momentum. But key question is not only ministers level, but other level of the ministerial government official should understand this issue, and more practically how we can implement on the ground is very, very important issue, as we discussed whole day today. More action and result and impact is definitely a challenge, and I hope that I can explain a little bit more in the regulatory practice how it works. So anyway, I stop here.
Well, I'd love to sort of follow up on that and ask if there are any specific examples that you can point to where we're seeing precisely.
Yes, for example, it's not a developing countries issue, but cyclone is a big issue, not only developing, but developed countries. And recently, Australia's case, because of affordability issues, cyclone is too expensive. So government buy in, and they provide a reinsurance pool as a stop loss. So, and to the insurance company. So in other words, consumers can gain or can purchase insurance in an affordable manner. So this is sort of government support and make it affordable, the insurance. And earthquake insurance in Japan's case, exactly the same. And this kind of government PPP issue is very, very important to make, insurance affordable. And today's example, Morocco's example, is extremely good example. And, when we do this support to emerging market, definitely, we need support, but also skin in the game. They should sort of, pay something, Otherwise, they have no ownership. So Morocco's example is a very good example. But also, for example, India, that Alex was there, they have also microinsurance support by the government or encourage to the private sector to cover the microinsurance. Philippines is the same. So government, support of this type is very, very important. But most important issue is, as I said, raise awareness in collaboration with, everybody, public, private, together. This not only ministerial government official, but people to raise awareness. Insurance is so helpful, and we have to, cover the insurance. Otherwise, all our goodwill, we are very much supply side discussion today here, but the demand side is so critical. And in order to enhance the demand side, we need communication and make them understand the insurance issue. And that's definitely public-private partnership is very helpful, particularly led by policymakers, but private sector can be very helpful too.
Yeah, so communication is the key. And if we think through, Alex, the role that brokers in particular can play around enhancing that risk awareness that Yoshi is referring to, and that understanding of insurance, what are the, I mean, you've touched on some of this already, but what are the other things that we should be doing alongside those that we're already doing?
Well, from a global broking perspective, then you would have best practices would be shared within the different countries through our different organizations. And hopefully we would also learn if there's something specific to one particular country where it wasn't being run by, or by any of the larger companies. That would be good too. I think, one of the things we do for our clients is, one, we offer choice. And then some places, broking is not exactly respected yet, especially in some of the emerging companies. So we have a job ourselves to gain trust and respectability. On the reinsurance side, again, the larger brokers have access to being able to find capacity, and I think that's important. One of the things that we're doing, as you may be aware, I'm chairman of Blue Marble. And we on the sort of the private side, we are working using the distribution of Marsh, for instance, to go to the supply chains where they require resilience of some of our clients. For instance, coffee suppliers with small farmers in Latin America and Africa, or it could be spices and so on. So I think we're sort of trying to mobilize everywhere we can to improve that ESG discussion, as well as solve issues that are pertinent to the underserved.
So look, this I mean, there's an awful lot there, and this is a short, sharp session, and I'm keeping an eye on my timekeepers. What I'd like to do before I open it up to the floor and see if there are any questions to round out the day is to go to each of you for your recommendations, so that we can then look to build upon that in our conversations after this panel. So Yoshi, if I could turn to you, do you have any recommendations for the insurance community? Yeah,
clear recommendation is government, private sector, and also research expert or risk expert should communicate more. PPP is easy to say, but in my experience, government people are hesitating to talk with the industry, and the industry people, maybe because of the government people's attitude, they hesitate with talking with the government. Not only ministry and so on, but also regulators. But regulators' mandate, as I said, is changed now. The market development is very important mandate for them. So now this close communication is essential. And not only the government regulators and industry, but also these donors, a country who receive donation and so on, communication is extremely important. It's easy to say, but in practice, it's very, very few still have a very trustworthy communication happens. So communication is a key word, I think.
Mm-hmm. Alex, do you have any recommendations either for the insurance industry or government?
Yeah, just annoying as it is, I'm still more and more convinced, and I had a long flight back from India, that to the extent that we can have open source modeling understood by everybody, analytics that people trust, then government and the private sector and the individuals, the voters, etc., will understand why an insurance premium is what it is and why not being covered is not a good thing. And then we can work from there. I just am concerned by, we talked about trust, and there's still awareness between public officials and the private sector and vice versa. And to the extent that the numbers, the analytics come from the private sector, there's a profit motive there that worries oftentimes the regulators.
Yep. And Michel, feel free to react to what Yoshi and Alex have said so far, but also turning to you for your recommendations for the industry and for government.
First recommendation for government is something which is quite delicate, because I think we need also probably on our side to do something. I think Alex said something very important. Democracy is something very nice, but it has a touch of being short-term. Meaning, and all we discuss here is a little bit long-term, or it happens in a future which is not immediate, which probably explains the fact that we take so much time in taking the decision that we should take. But I do believe that the best way for public sector and private sector to work together would be definitively not only to communicate and to improve the way in which some things are accessible to their population, but definitively also to work together on the risk that they have and the support that we can give them directly. It's quite impressive to see the level of underinsurance that exists even in mature countries in matters of infrastructures. So I do not say that it will be cheap, I do not say it will be perfect, but I don't think that there is a better way to work together if we do not address a problem together. And the problem together would be, what have you which you could insure and which you do not insure? And we could discuss about that. And last point, we have, because of our discretion, and sorry for Yoshi, but the majority of the regulators on this planet on financial services are bankers. Mm-hmm. So there is an enormous misunderstanding about what insurance can bring. But that's our fault. I do not criticize anybody. That's just make sure that people do understand what we do and what is the added value that we bring, and get off from our caves.
So now that we're leaving our caves and we're talking about our value add, time for one question, I think, from the audience. Does anyone have a question? Yeah, thank you. Second row.
Thank you very much. Yoshihiro, Swiss Re. Very interesting comments on modeling and awareness and communication. The one thing I didn't hear and makes me think is terms and conditions, wordings. A big part of the distrust towards insurance, I think, comes from the small print in contracts. So what's your view on that, right? We can try to create universal models, etc., in the industry, but how do you think about terms and conditions and contract wordings? And is there a task there, and some thoughts on what we could do?
Taking into consideration the reputation that terms and conditions brought to the insurance industry, I cannot be in disagreement of you. There is, of course, always some legal necessity, but I agree with you that we can probably simplify quite a lot. The fact that, I don't know if many of you know Mr. Kafka, and you'll know the books that he tends to write. The man did work in an insurance company, worked generally in Prague. Okay. Just to tell you, that's probably what terms and conditions insurance brings you to create as literature. So I totally agree with you. There is a level of probably simplification. We need to be careful because there is always potential abuse, but there is a level of simplification, and it's the image also of the industry which has been suffering from that.
And definitely, this is also a critical point for payout quickly and completely well. That's extremely important. As Alex mentioned, parametric insurance. That type of very clear payout immediately after the accident is extremely valuable for government and emerging market. So that's maybe not only term and condition issue, but also product design for the consumers is extremely important.
Great, and I think we have time for one more question. Second row again.
Good afternoon. My name is Olga Spekart, Syngenta Foundation for Sustainable Agriculture. I want to make an observation, is that every country is in a different shape. We work in emerging economies, and every country has a different tailor with a different scissor. My question to you is, do we believe that insurance on a standalone basis is going to fly in countries where we talk about penetration rate below even 1%, when at the same time the GDP is raising up from 4 to 7%, and that gap between the insurance penetration and that raise on GDP is not really matching, right? So who is going to address this issue, and how this community and this amazing coalition can help to tackle that issue in order to make it happen in one country and be replicated in a neighborhood country? Over to you.
Can I say?
Yes, please.
That's extremely valuable question and comments, you know. What we do, insurance community does, is we usually provide insurance to mid-level income or high-income people. And what is missing out is underserved, you know, or low-income people. So we have to focus very much underserved population, and as a community, and emerging market. But not only emerging market, but the developed market is the same. Therefore, we discuss, you know, Morocco's example, India's example, Philippines' example, those government support, and also, you know, make private sector or just, you know, can do business. So therefore, our attention should pay more and more the population. And by the way, those population in the emerging market is bigger and bigger, and then they move to the more mid-income population. So these are very important population that the industry also focus on. But then definitely we need much more attention to that population so that, you know, protection gap is addressed.
But at the risk of upsetting my private sector colleagues, I do believe there is a moment in which, in order to start the pump, you need to use the state. And that's the moment in which, taking into account the fact that the nightmare is anyway, if it happens, the state will have to pay. So you have the option to go to the World Bank and pray for a money that you will never pay back, or to make sure, sorry, no, that you pay back in delay, or to organize something in which you realize there is a piece of the population which cannot take care of itself by itself. Let's make sure that a few things are done by us, and let's maybe move slowly from public to private according to the level of evolution of the middle class. But there we need to create trust, you know, between the two, and just saying it's starting the pump, because you need a political power to start the pump. But once the pump is started, you can move slowly with the evolution of your middle class, and not only passing to the private sector, which the risk which are a disaster, which is happening not only in emerging markets, by the way. So that's the point in which I do believe that the cooperation is very important. And again, addressing directly the issue. You want to cover your infrastructure, we can give you something, a solution there. There are too many people who are uncovered on health. That there is a solution, but start the pump, because we cannot totally start the pump ourselves. And then, of course, an enormous effort of simplified products coming from our side. But the starting the pump by the public sector and a move to the private one, once it doesn't make any sense anymore for the public sector to drive that, would for me be a good start. And it would bring us all together to address an issue, not to speak together of a dream.
Great, thank you. And Alex, any final comments from your end?
I think that digitalization is actually going to be a big enabler for this. And I do think that, yes, every country is different, and the needs may be, and the economics, the demographics may be different. But there's a lot of similarities, as we were talking about, as far as the underserved are concerned. And I think there are best practices, and I think also in the agricultural area as well. I mean, I keep on dwelling on parametric because it's just so clear. And so it may be for animals and temperature, or it may be rainfall or lack of for crops. The farmers who get paid there, and the payout is quick, and talk about how they've managed to keep their families together in the year that comes, and all that sort of stuff. I think that it's good press, and I'm optimistic, but I think, you know, we've made a dent. The dent is getting bigger, but there's much to be done.
And on that note, and keeping time, I think it's clear that there are some very pronounced messages from this discussion. So there's a real need to build on that trust across our community with the stakeholders that we're speaking with governments, and within this existing ecosystem. Also the value around communication and sharing that best practice that Alex has just touched upon, and ensuring that we're communicating that widely. And then, as Michel said, time for us to move out of our caves. So let's be vocal and pronounced about the work that is being done, the dents that are being made, and also the role and the pivotal role that insurance can play in addressing those protection gaps. So please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you, Michel, Alex.
Thank you.
And we'll now hand back to Ekhosuehi.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Great timing, sharp discussion, really enjoyable, which we said it would be. And just to conclude, so many things have come out through the discussions today from the morning. I don't want to go into rehashing all the things that we have discussed, because I also think the final panel brought it together in a very excellent way. But I would say there are several things that stood out to me, which is this focus on implementation. How can we do more and focus more on that bit, right? How can we scale up many of the programs that we are engaged in? How can we expand them and make them deeper and speak to not just products, but the real risk challenge that many of the countries and communities face? But there was also a point that I think that Yoshi touched on, which is how do we engage with the demand side of this conversation? And I think that today we've heard a lot from supply. We have heard some from the demand side, but perhaps this is also an opportunity for us to reflect as the IDF and how we take this movement forward. Let's get into regions, let's get into countries to take the conversations that we have there to those communities, and that will help all of us at the end of the day. So I just wanted to end on that note. I think it's been a very rich conversation. We can pick it up during the apéro and the dinner, which is coming, and also tomorrow, which is also an excellent agenda that we have structured for you. And so before I close, I have been given very clear instructions in terms of logistics. Just so that we keep to time. Obviously, we have the apéro, 6:30 group, and sorry, see, I'm already getting mixed up. We will have before we get to the apéro, we will have a group photo. We will have 15 minutes, Swiss style, to get that group photo done. So when we exit and go to the terrace, it will be on the lawn. So I want to ask you, as soon as we've concluded, just to swiftly make your way there so that we can get that out of the way, and then we can get to the apéro. Right? And then for those of you who have confirmed dinner will start at 19 at the Andy Warhol and Maximilian Bircher rooms, which are at the entrance of the building. When you enter the building, for those of you who have arrived at the center, you turn right, and that's where the location will be. So logistics out of the way, fantastic day. Thank you to everyone for your contributions, and I'm excited to see what tomorrow brings. Let's get to it.